Okay, for question number 3, the problem is that a digital signal 1 or 0 can be sent through a channel, and the received data may be different from the signal sent out. So suppose that the transmitter sends out 0 with probability of 0.6 and 1 can send 1 with probability of 0.4, and when 0 is transmitted, the receiver receives 0 with probability of 0.7 and 1 with probability of 0.3, and when 1 is transmitted, the receiver receives 0 with probability of 0.2 and can receive 1 with probability of 0.8. So from the this description, you can have this this diagram, this picture. So the problem is that this side is a transmitter and this side is receiver. So the transmitter can send 0 and 1 and with a probability of 0.6 and 0.4. So when the receiver receives the digit, it can be 0 or 1 with a probability. So for example, if the transmitter sends a 0 and it has 0.7 of probability that the receiver receives 0 and have 0.3 probability that the receiver that the 0 convert to 1 and receives a 1. So the problem number 1 is to let you find the probability that data 0 is received. So shown in the datagram, it should be this one and this one, which means that the sender sends a 0 and it receives actually 0, and the sender sends a 1 and it has some error and the receiver receives a 0. Okay, so in order to solve this problem, actually we can make some markups. Let's say T0 is 0 is transmitted, and let's say T1 is 1 is transmitted. So T0 and T1 is this side, and R0 is 0 is received, R1 is 1 is received. Okay, so R0 and R1 is this receiver side. Okay, so we need to find out the probability that data 0 is received. So it's R0, data 0 is received. So from the picture, we can see that the 0 is received. It had two paths. It's this side, this path, and this path. So it's a probability of 0 is transmitted, but 0 is transmitted and it receives the actual 0. So it's it receives 0 under the condition that T0 is transmitted, and plus this pass is that 1 is transmitted, but it receives a 0 as some errors. So it's T1 is transmitted and receives R0 under the condition that T1 is transmitted. So it's pretty obvious. There's a times. So the probability of T0 is transmitted is so it's 0.6 times R0 is received under the condition of T0 is transmitted, so it's 0.7, and plus T1 is transmitted times R0 is received under the condition that T1 is transmitted, so it's 0.2. So the answer is 0.5. Okay. And for the second question is that to let you find out the probability of error. Error means that it sends a 1 but it receives a 0, and it sends a 0 but it receives a 1. So probability of error is, so it's send a 0 but receives a 1 under the condition that 0 is sent, and plus sends a 1 but it actually receives a 0. Okay, so this line to the graph is actually, it wants to send a 0 but it receives a 1, and it wants to send a 1 but it receives a 0. So the probability of sending a 0 is 0.6 times receives R1 in the condition that T1 was sent. So it's 0.3 plus T1 is transmitted, 0.4 times T1 R0 receives a 0 but under the condition that 1 is sent, so it's receives a 0 but 1 is sent, so 0.2. Okay, so the final answer is 0.6.